amazing women and people in general you've had on these presentations. I feel honored to be a part of it. I really do appreciate that you guys are gonna do one geared toward education, helping people get into college.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our SheHeroes College Admissions Panel. I'm Lori Nelson, the Executive Director of SheHeroes, and we're so excited about today's event. We've lined up the top experts in the field, including our very own board member, Julie Allen, who will be leading and moderating our discussion today. So before we get started, first I'd like to turn things over to Dr. Sophia Yen, who is our founder and board member.
Hey
Sophia.
everybody, I'm Dr. Sophia Yen. Feel free to claim all your titles. You know, my mom said always claim your titles, and particularly if your parents paid for you to go through school, claim your titles. And so I co-founded SheHeroes.org with two sorority sisters from MIT, because the goal was when you Google X profession, a person with a uterus would be like, I love my job and this is how I got there and these are the obstacles I overcame. And so SheHeroes provides free online videos highlighting those with uteri or born with uteri who are succeeding in their field, and covers what obstacles they've overcome, what it took for them to get there. And now we've expanded our programming to meet your SheHeroes, as well as these kinds of panels to help everybody become the best person that they can be. And so the content is open to everyone, but we are elevating more people and sometimes hitting more on the how it might be more difficult with people with uteri to advance in society. So I thank you all for joining. Thanks to this amazing panel for giving your time. So know that these people volunteered, and I'm so thankful for everyone who's attending today.
Okay.
Back to you, Lori.
Yeah. So our panel today is led by, as I said, our board member, Dr. Julie Allen. And Julie has been involved in education for decades. She works with all kinds of institutions across the country, including NASA, which I'm very excited by. But she is also the founder of a program called the College Road, which was recognized by the Educational Policy Institute as the #1 college access program in the country. So we're delighted to have her with us today. Now is your opportunity to find out everything you ever wanted to know about the college admissions process. So on that note, I will turn it over to you, Julie. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. Welcome. We're so glad that you joined us today. We're talking about following our SheHeroes or our heroes and helping you become a SheHero too. And so one of the things that we're going to be talking about is, of course, is getting ready for the education that you will need to follow your dreams. Now, I'm sure that you know there's an application to complete, a FAFSA to fill out, college visits to make, and all of that. But there is so much more that happens ahead of those things. And today we have some experts here who can help you really think about how to make your application shine and how to make yourself stand out and to feel really comfortable through that process. But before we delve into that, I want to introduce our guests. I'll start with David Montesano, who is the founder and director of College Match. He's also considered the very first admission strategist in the US when he created College Match in 2001. So he really created this field of folks who become experts in this process and who he's created an amazing framework for helping students move forward. He's also the author of Brand You, which is a favorite book of mine. I recommend that a lot, and the concepts in it to help them move forward. David, do you want to tell us a little bit about the work you do with families and students?
Sorry, the what? The work, you mean? Is that okay?
Yeah, the work that you do with families and students. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a small practice. I do, mainly work, and I'll just be straightforward about it, mainly work with the top 10% of earners. That's kind of the client base who can afford, unfortunately, to pay. And I have to say, this is largely, and this is why I like doing this kind of work and pro bono work as well, although I don't have as much time to do that as I'd like. But, and to be, helping like Boys Hope, Girls Hope, organizations like that, is that really, I think 90% of people just have to worry about paying for college. And that's pretty much what ends up driving a lot of the decision making. So it is nice to work with the 10% who don't have to worry about financial aid. It makes it really a lot more open, because then you can kind of just focus in on other things, you know. So there's more choice. And I think a lot of it's driven, at least in my mind, by the financial piece, unfortunately. So I'd love to help as many people as I can with that. And, you know, I think just giving that kind of insight that, hey, that's really what drives this is important. The thing that's interesting, though, is that if you're kind of middle and upper middle class, it's harder to get financial aid. And so that's one of the things that I hope to be able to talk about today is if people have incomes below, say, I know it sounds like a lot of money, but incomes below 150K combined income as a family, they can start to get that financial aid, which would be make it possible maybe to go to private schools. And then it opens up a lot more possibilities for people.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And great points in terms of, you know, where the drivers are in making these decisions. So I'm going to introduce Kirsten Athen, she's an admissions counselor at Nebraska Wesleyan University in Lincoln, Nebraska. Also, full disclosure, my alma mater. So I have a great heart for Nebraska Wesleyan. Among the other best and recognitions, U.S. News and World Report recently ranked Wesleyan #1 among independent universities in its region. They are doing groundbreaking work around financial aid. So thanks for bringing that up, David, because Wesleyan's really they have really gone forward in you know, helping families make a private education affordable. And so Kirsten focuses, I think, on mostly transfer students and graduate students, but she is a member of the larger admission staff and has joined us today to talk about that. So tell us more about life of a college admissions counselor.
Well, thank you for the introduction. As you said, my name is Kirsten Athen. I work mostly with graduate students, but I work closely also with our first year and transfer admissions teams. And you're right, financial aid is a huge concern for a lot of families that we work with. The cool thing about private colleges like Nebraska Wesleyan is that unlike public schools, we can kind of do our own thing. And so right now we have an access scholarship where students who are Pell eligible can get their tuition completely waived. So they get basically a full ride scholarship. All they'd have to pay for is like room and board. But things like that are what Nebraska Wesleyan tries to do to make college more affordable and accessible. On the transfer team, we have specific pathways partners with our local community colleges as well. So if a student goes to Southeast Community College or any of the other local community colleges, they will be able to see what classes they're going to need to take to transfer in and successfully complete a four-year education at our institution. But it's awesome to work in admissions. I love helping students, and I know everybody else on the admissions team really wants to see you as a student succeed at college. So when you're going through that application process, we are here to help you every step of the way. And I'm really glad that I'll get to share some perspective on what it is from our end that we're looking for, because we really just want to get to know you and help you as a student be successful at our university.
Great point. One of the activities that I do with students when I first started to work with them is to say, draw me a picture of what you think an admissions counselor looks like. And oftentimes they don't have it anywhere close. So, you know, I think, yes, the universities are looking for, they're going to make a huge investment in you. And so, you know that they're there to help. Now, college, as we know, is it's a huge decision. And this comes with a lot of stress and anxiety, right? Tremendous amount. There's paying for it, getting in, finding the right fit for you, hopefully having more than one choice about where you can go. I mean, you definitely, you know, students want to be able to have options and some control in this process. I think it's really helpful sometimes to remember that we all survived this process. We all survived it. Right? We all found a place to go to school. We all found a place that fit for us. And it propelled us to the careers that we really wanted to pursue and to, you know, gain mastery in. And so just really quickly for David and Kirsten, what schools did you go to? And is there any sort of horrors or joys that you remember in making that decision? Just to give you a little human, you know, you survived this kind of a perspective. Tristan, you want to go first, and then we'll go
I
to
can kick us off. So my decision was a little bit easy. I had some veterans benefits from my parents to use, so I had to go to a state school. So I went to University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So the stress of choosing a school was a bit off my shoulders. But once I was in that school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. It was really nice because for the first year or two, I was just undecided and exploring. And really through the help of my advisor, I was able to get the majors and minors that really aligned with my passions. So I graduated with distinction, a 3.9 GPA with a double major in philosophy and English with a concentration in creative writing and a double minor in psychology and communication studies. It's a mouthful to say that, but I'm really proud to have graduated with that degree when I came in knowing nothing about what I wanted to do in my higher education experience. So one of my biggest pieces of advice to people is always just to do what you love, follow your passions, and as long as you use kind of that as a guide, you're going to end up having a great experience and learning a ton and also having fun along the way.
Okay, so we have one survivor. All right, David.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, for me it was a little different. I mean, I came from a family of educators, I should say. So my dad was in education; he was a higher ed researcher and a special ed kind of expert. So I grew up with that, and I didn't want any part of that. I wanted to go and become an environmental attorney. Anyway, I left Oregon, went to UC San Diego for my first year, and I just happened to be like interested in looking at, okay, how could I get into, say, Yale Law School or Stanford Law School? And I ran the numbers. I looked at microfiche. This was like in the 80s. It's like, I'm older, but looked at microfiche for about 20 years. And I realized there's no way statistically to get from UC San Diego, which has 100% of kids in the top 10%, into Yale Law School. It just, no one was getting in. They were applying, but they just weren't getting in. So I started looking at other schools. And I lived with a family that founded Pomona College, which is a little Ivy. And so I kind of realized or became aware of the hidden sort of system that's out there of these little Ivies. It's all over. And actually, the Nebraska Wesleyan's part of that. And so I didn't know that at the time that I was at a research university, German model research university, and I was going to go to an English liberal arts model school. So I looked at the numbers and I figured that these little schools like a Nebraska Wesleyan or Carleton or I went to Occidental, transferred there, would have just a much better success rate, because they're more writing intensive, critical thinking intensive, public speaking intensive, and leadership development oriented than these big schools. I mean, the interaction with professors is just unrivaled, but they're more expensive. They're double the price, right? So anyway, the economics somehow worked out for me. I was able to do it. Had to work part to help pay, but it all kind of came together, and I got merit money, which is something that I'm really excited to share with people today. Is that the colleges like Occidental gave me merit money. And a lot of the private schools, if it's not a reach and it's not like, say, in the Northeast somewhere or, somewhere super popular, just geographically, it could be the same quality, right? Nebraska is a great example, or Minnesota, someplace that it's not Boston, right? It's not DC. It's not California. Sometimes those places won't give any money because people just go to those places and they know that. So for me, it was just being aware of that fact. I lucked out because I did go to school in LA, but they gave me merit money to go, and it can help pay for, and this is our experience, really help pay for about a year of room and board and tuition if you do it right. If you have great grades, great test scores, great honors, great extracurriculars, your chances of getting a year off room and board tuition at a private school is pretty decent if you do everything the right way. So anyway, that's kind of been my story, and that's kind of the way I help people, is just thinking about that.
Okay, well, that leads really well to my next question, which is, I think there's a high awareness around, strong GPA, very rigorous, and most rigorous coursework you can get your hands around, get your head around, that you can handle. ACT, SAT scores in the schools that are still using those as a measure. Getting those numbers in the place that they need to be, that's pretty standard. But I think there are a lot of ways in addition to that students demonstrate that they are a strong student, that they're worthy of coming into a community. And so when all things are equal, because a lot of people are going to have a nice GPA coming out of high school. A lot of people are going to have, a pretty good ACT or SAT score. Those things can be fairly equal, but then what makes you stand out? And one of the things that I always say is, if you want to signal that you are ready for college, then demonstrate that you're interested in something. And how do you do that? And I really push students into thinking, not about just volunteering somewhere, right? I see these resumes where it's like, I went to the animal shelter once, the homeless shelter once, I went to I picked up trash once, I did this once. And, I just wanted to see how many blanks I could fill in. And what that signals to me is you're not looking for ways to really drive yourself forward. And so, I talked to them about, why don't you find, some volunteer opportunity where you can become a better writer, like a stronger writer? How about, volunteering to, your school paper, for example, or, nonprofits need people to write stuff all the time. Why not attack that? Or I had a student once who volunteered as a pen pal with seniors. And I mean, she was cranking out hundreds of words, extra words, and a week. And it helped hone her writing considerably. So, I mean, that's just one little tiny example, but I want to hear from our experts. What are other ways that students stand out when everything else is equal? What do you do? What should you be doing right now to get ready for that? Trust me, the time is not October 1st of the year you're applying for college. Way too late. So, what should students be doing to really demonstrate that, to get that merit aid that you're talking about, to put themselves into a position where a school says, I want you so much that we're going to give you that financial aid. David, do you want to lead us off?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So the way that I'm looking at this, there's a couple things people should know, and it's not really bad or good, but it's a way to frame the discussion that you're talking about. And what it is, Julie, is there's 3 different types of high school curricula. People aren't aware of this. They're just buckets. And the colleges would always prefer like the kid to go to the equivalent of the liberal arts college or the English, the Oxford, Cambridge style. It's a high school thing. It's like going to, like in England, it's called a public school. It's really private, like a boarding school or day school. And then here it's a boarding or day school. And they're all over the country, right? It doesn't matter which one you go to, but the Wall Street Journal did a study twice. They haven't done it since because it doesn't sell paper, doesn't make parents happy, right? To hear that you have to send your kid to a prep school to have the best shot at the tops, to get into the top schools. But places like MIT, Stanford, Harvard, they got the data, and it just basically said, hey, all the feeder schools, the top out of 35,000 high schools in America, the top feeders were almost exclusively independent schools, formerly Protestant independent high schools. So the thesis there is just that they want more pushy on the writing, critical thinking, public speaking, and leadership development. The next type of high school curriculum is IB, International Baccalaureate. Has everyone heard of that? Okay. So if you haven't, this is the equalizer, I believe, is that kind of exists at a lot of public schools too. So if you have a chance to send your kid to an IB, full IB, they have to do well in it. It's way harder than AP, way pushier on the writing, critical thinking, public speaking. They have dedicated faculty, international Swiss standards, really pushy. If you do that, colleges pay attention. So that's after health and happiness. The type of curriculum is the next thing. So are you in the first, second, and the third type is AP. So AP, parochial, everything else is kind of third. It's just not as pushy academically as the other top 2, right? Most of us didn't go to those top two. So here's why I'm telling you this, not to bum you out. It's just to say, you got to prove to the colleges that you're a good writer, great critical thinker, great public speaker, and a leader. They won't take it for granted if you're in an AP program and you get straight A's. That's why you hear about kids who have straight A's in AP programs not getting into colleges, because they weren't really reassuring the colleges that they had all this other stuff that some of the other applicants might have had. So that's one thing right away we tell people is, look, you've really got to prove to people the writing is not taken for granted. You have to prove outside of school that you're great at writing. It's not enough to get an A in an English class, even an AP class. You really have to, get third-party verification for ability outside of school. And it could just be, enrolling at a creative writing program locally, just showing that interest or that passion. It doesn't have to be anything special beyond that. Or competing, in the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. That's another way, with a poem or just a piece of, writing that you like. and getting a regional award. That's a great way to prove to colleges, if you go to an AP program, a parochial school, or another type of curriculum that's not so pushy on the writing, that you're a good writer. At least you care about writing and you'll become a better writer. That's what it is, you know. So that's one thing, is the curriculum type. Then it's the grade level, GPA. So if you're at a school that is an independent school, that maybe less grade inflation, pushier, harder to get the A's, then they don't expect the GPA to be 3.9 or 4.0. It can be 3.75 and above. But the tiers are like unweighted 3.75, 3.5, 3.0. That's kind of the tier, and then everything below that. So it's like first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice. And it's like first choice type of curriculum, second choice, third choice. So you could be the third choice type of curriculum, meaning AP, parochial, everything else, and the first choice there. And that's a good position to be in. But remember, then they don't say, okay, you're admitted. And here's an example, is that if you look at Brown, you look at Duke, 60% of valedictorians get turned away from those two schools. And these aren't, they're the toughest to get into, obviously, at 5% roughly. But there's even tougher schools like Stanford or Harvard at 3%, and MIT at 4%. So it's like, these represent kind of the hardest, but you know, these are even some that are tougher. And they're turning away 60% of valedictorians. Why would they do that? These are like the top student at that high school. And there's 35,000 high schools, 2.2 million high school leavers looking for four-year spots. These are top kids. Why would they get turned down by those two schools? Well, because they're not offering anything beyond that. They're just offering the grades or the test scores. So it's grades, test scores, or no test scores now, because everything's test optional except for MIT and a couple other schools. And you get looked at. And then what are you offering? So grades are really a hurdle to get over. Test scores are a hurdle to get over. Nobody's really doing admission on that basis that much. Some schools do, but like the harder to get into schools or the more popular schools are now looking at extracurriculars or holistic admission. So what are you going to be known for? They understand that as a student, you're probably well-rounded. You do a lot of different things. Like Julie was explaining, you know, you might volunteer at animal shelter, you might do this or that. They want to see something that has a little bit more oomph, you know, a little more commitment. Academically, extracurriculars, academic ones go first, and then other stuff after that, typically. Now, if you could do an animal shelter thing that leads into some kind of animal biology or, you know, animal science research, that's the perfect way to vertically integrate that. We always look for academic plus other things. So it's all about vertical integration. It's all about you owning a space somewhere, some real estate. So we do recommend that people write a paper, do a project that they're particularly proud of. Basically, call it a passion project, call it whatever you want to call it, but do something that you're passionate about and somehow own some space. Anyway, that's the main thing
Yeah. Totally with all that. And I love the expression vertical integration of the you know, the service and community impact part, because that's very clear, right? We're integrating it across. It's not just this thing that we do over here. Quick question for you. We have a question in the chat about, so what if, right, the student is a STEM focused student? Does the reading still matter? Writing still matter?
Yeah, because so back to that original idea that MIT was one of the schools the Wall Street Journal got the data on, and MIT is, you know, STEM school based. I mean, they have social science. They even have English, a great English department, but it's mainly a STEM school. And so, I mean, that's the main focus, right? Same thing with Caltech. You know, there's a few of those out there. The data was showing that MIT preferred independent school kids. And the other data that I have is, if anyone wants to Google this, is look at international baccalaureate admission rates, and Crimson Education did a great study, and it can quadruple, double, triple, quadruple the chances of admission if you do full IB and you have a 3.5 or better. So what is that telling us? It's telling us that even MIT wants that. I went to Caltech through Occidental, and when I was there, this is years and years ago, I was, you know, dually enrolled, and I was kind of shocked because the test scores were the highest in the country at Caltech at that time, and the critical reading, or basically the reading and writing scores of the SAT were equal to the math scores at Caltech. And I was thinking, why is that? That's weird. Why wouldn't they just all be kind of like super high math and really low on the English? You know, like 600 English and reading and writing and 800 math. But they were able to get parity, and over time, what I realized is that the SAT and ACT don't necessarily measure things like English ability. it's more process of elimination, deductive reasoning. It's basically a math test. It's analytical. It's how good you are at linear processing. So the mathy people are just good at just isolating and deducing what's happening there and plugging in formulas. And that's why they get these great scores on the reading and writing section, right? And it can be formulaic. And that's why prep does work for that. And so basically what I'm trying to say is that what we've found is that, yeah, you've got to be, to get into MIT or a place like that, or Caltech. We just placed a young lady at Caltech this last year. We believe that, yeah, in addition to her great math and science stuff that she did, which was spiking nationally, she was in a pre-professional ballet program at the same time. That's really what these schools, I mean, I always call it just firing on a couple cylinders. It's like, I don't think they want just a one only STEM kind of deal at certain levels. They want to be, they have enough people out there that have, like, say, a humanities spike as well. It doesn't have to be as high. It could be like state level maybe, but in addition to some national STEM related stuff like an AIME math qualification, like the highest level, or, an Intel competition win, something, finalist kind of deal. Something like that, Regeneron, those things start adding up. And so these are national level spikes, but then you have a state level humanities spike, then you're in business, then you're firing on more than one cylinder. All colleges love that. So an MIT or a Caltech admit is the same as a Harvard or Stanford admit. It's really not that radically different. Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope that answered it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it did. Kirsten, tell us, you're in the not enviable position of reading thousands of applications that come, in young hopefuls trying to get into Wesleyan. So can you just maybe isolate some applications that come in, students that you've looked at that just had that wow factor, that vertically integrated kind of resume and application that David was talking about, who just presented as wham, and what was there about that?
I think one of the things that can really separate a person in the application process is their extracurricular activities, whether that be theater, music, sports. A lot of people do choose their college based on those extracurricular activities. So one thing we like to think about is it's not just students applying to us and picking us as a university. We're also picking them, but it's an interpersonal relationship. It's not a one-way street with that. And so I think students who just have an idea of what they want to pursue. Like I remember one applicant, one of my colleagues told me about, wanted to pursue physics, but she also wanted to do theater. So having a broad base of desire in your plan of study can also be something really compelling. So I think one of the biggest things is students who have interests, want to be involved in a community, and aren't afraid to show that unique aspect. Because like David was saying, with whether you're, submitting test scores or a GPA self-reportedly, those scores don't tell us anything about who you are as a person. And that's really what we want to know is, who are you? What can you bring to the table? What are you interested in exploring? And how can we as a university help you to achieve those goals?
Yeah, I think that's yeah, absolutely. People who know me call me the curiosity lady. The students who work with me call me the curiosity bully, because I'm always saying, you have to be curious. That's the whole point of all this. Be curious. Demonstrate that you're curious. That shows up in a lot of different ways, right? And so I think that's really a big piece of both of you are tackling here, is to say, be somebody interesting. And being interesting is about being curious about things in the world, and then finding the very best way to show that, right, through the material that you put together to submit. One of the things, we're talking about, the most successful scenarios here, right? We're talking about, this very linear process that, you're taking care of all this stuff. But what we know is that life is messy, right? And that students, that's the whole point of being a student, right? Win and lose, make huge mistakes, screw up, recover. And so one of the things that I think is important that we talk about a little bit is how you've seen students harness failures in this process, and or how perhaps they've used that to make a compelling argument to come into school, or to show that they really are the student that an institution is looking for, because they've had a failure, and that they've really been able to turn around from that. I think that's important, because this, what we're talking about is perfect world scenarios, right? We do everything perfectly. We know that young people, well, even old people, I have to admit, don't do anything perfectly. So, it's this process of recovering. Can you talk a little bit about that? We'll start with Kirsten. Just talk about how failure looks when when a student really turns it to their advantage. And we'll go to David and have him get some insight on that as well.
Yeah, one piece of advice I always like to share with students is there's no such thing as a failure. There are only learning experiences. And sometimes switching the way you're looking at an experience can be helpful. Mind you, certain experiences are different from, like failures might be different than challenges, like say losing a family member. Those things can really impact a young person when they go through that. So I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give is, feel open and vulnerable to talk about those things with, whether it be an admissions counselor or your high school counselor. The people in your life who are there to help guide you along your path empathize with those really difficult experiences and will be able to help you work through them so that you can see a future. Because you're right, life is chaotic sometimes. Not everyone has the same story, and that's a good thing. So I think being able to realize your path is unique for you, and you can do whatever you choose in life with the right guidance and help from others. Never be afraid to ask for help is another piece of advice I will tell students, because other people in the world are some of the biggest supporters who can really help you to achieve those goals, whether it's getting into a specific college or getting into a specific career field down the road. But yeah, no two challenges are alike. So sometimes it's hard to give, single file advice for this sort of thing, because each student really does have their own unique story. And it really opens my eyes, the things I've heard students share with me when we're talking, throughout the application process. And whoever you might be sharing your experiences with, we do care and we understand. So don't ever feel like any challenge is something that's going to count you out, because we want to help support you so that you can be where you want to be in life.
I think that's, there is a certain sign of maturity when you can talk about something that didn't go well. I remember when I applied for graduate school, I didn't, my Wesleyan freshman year was focused on largely on fun, I would have to say. And so my grade point average wasn't, I did great from that point on, but, I did not have the 4.0, which is what I really needed for the graduate school I was looking at. So that was, in order to get there and get the scholarship support I needed to do grad school, I needed to have a 4.0. I didn't have it. So I was able to crawl myself to a pretty respectable 3.8 or so, but, and I had to find a way in my application materials to demonstrate that, to show that, look, I screwed up. I was 18 and it was really fun. But I think, but I had to demonstrate that I was the graduate student they were looking for, and that I'd gotten all those. And that, involved, talking with the admissions folks. So, David, what's your take on this?
Wow. Well, the great advice that you're both giving, Julie and Kirsten. I can only add to that because it's perfect advice. Well, I could give an example, actually. A lot of people that I work with, I think, come to me, like, I almost feel like a fixer, you know what I mean? Like they have a, right? Like somebody said in this business, like nobody comes to us, Dave, without a problem. They're all, otherwise they won't hire a consultant. So that's fine. And that's the nature of the business. But, quite often I'll get a student who has a lower GPA. And the first thing that I tell them is that, you know, you're an amazing human. Like, you've got all these different reasons for this GPA. It kind of is, you know, there's a lot of things that would explain it. But the colleges are looking at it differently, perhaps, and they might be thinking, you know, they're willing, as Kirsten said, to really take into consideration any you know, circumstances. But on the other hand, you know, you're not being admitted. It's in a way an application that's being submitted and admitted. And there's a big difference, meaning that they're going to be skimming these, right? And if they say they're here, but they're really here, and your job is to solve problems for them. And sometimes it's diversity, but you have to ask yourself, like, is there a problem having a lower GPA person? You know, right? That might not be what they want, because their concern might be, hey, if this kid is in the third type of curriculum, say AP environment, parochial school, and has just a flat B average, a B, and, you know, they're going to come here and get a C average. Is that what we want to admit? You know, that they could be obviously thinking that way. So what happens is we have to think the way they're going to think, like worst case it, you know, and really perception becomes reality. So that's what we teach the kids, you know, and your health and happiness are first, obviously, because without that, you have nothing. Then all roads lead from the grades, because the colleges are thinking if you go to the third type, you're going to get it's going to go down perhaps a level in college, right? Not up. So unless you're at an independent school or an IB program, then it might be flat. So I think what we try to say to these kids, and mostly they're not at independent schools or IB programs, is we interview them, say, well, you know, how did this come about? And what are ways, and are there any grades that you can point to later in the same subject where it's an A, to say, hey, you know what, I got a C and this is why. And you have to explain it. And I think you're so right, Julie. Like, if you just kind of are forthcoming about that in the additional information section, or maybe the essays, but I like to have people just give a really kind of almost like a statement about it, so people understand and put the grades in context. It's usually a learning challenge, or it could be a medical condition that's, you know, family situation, like losing a parent, something like you were saying. It's always usually there's a reason behind it. And usually the kid often is working twice as hard as everybody else just to get the C grade, you know. But what we have to do is say, okay, unless they're going to go to community college or someplace where the average GPA is a 2.0, right? Then, or, you know, somewhere around there, then they have to somehow prove that they can get A's. And so our job is to say, okay, what is the ideal condition to do that? Maybe it's taking a class online at Apex Learning or BYU, or where it's self-paced, the same exact class, and getting an A. You could do that in the summer when it won't jeopardize the GPA. And then what you can do is point to that and say, okay, yeah, this is why it happened. You know, I had this learning challenge, I had dyslexia, whatever. These are how it affects me. And I got the C grade or this D grade. Here's what I did to fix that. I went and took this course online, same course over the summer, and I got an A. So that's the storyline. I don't believe that colleges, I mean, I do think that they do stuff sometime on potential, but I really think proven ability goes a lot further for them. And if you just take that extra time to say, okay, but, you know, here was the challenge and here was the solution or the outcome. You know, I took this approach, and so it's like challenge, you know, approach, resolution, or result. That's the way we coach people to do it, because otherwise there's no proof that it's really going to get better. And they're taking on a lot of liability. And I just think why would they take on that? They don't have to take on that liability. They might just say to themselves, and Kirsten, forgive me for thinking about this the way you might, but like, would you say, this is a perfect question for you, at some point, would you be kind of, you know, just kind of think, well, they should go to community college and then come here, transfer, you know, because they're just not ready for this. I guess that's a question out there.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. And like, it is a case-by-case situation deal, but there are some students who might be more successful starting off at a community college. And I honestly love your piece of advice to retake a, you know, course through an online program during the summer and prove that you have a higher grade. I think that's an excellent strategy to show that, you know, this was happening during this time and I can and will do better. But yeah, it is unique per student, how we might handle some of those students who may get denied. But at an institution like ours, we have an 80% acceptance rate. So there's a lot less cases where we have to give those denial letters. But I do think that for certain students, getting that opportunity to shine in a community college and then transferring in could be one of their best options. And the great thing is we have scholarships for students who will transfer in. So you might even end up getting more money in the long run by transferring in later on. So that is really great insight though, David.
All right,
That's good.
everybody, bookmark, note, you're not down, right? You're not completely out. The through line here is you had a challenge. There are solutions that you need to find to counterbalance that challenge and then stay in the game. You can get where you want to go. Just keep, remember that, it's not that you're down. The big factor there is, can you get back up, and can you show that you can get back up? So yeah, absolutely. All right. So now let's assume, okay, so grades are good, extracurriculars are good. We've been down, but not out. We've crawled our way through that problem. Now, what happens? How does it affect students, or how can they do a better job of deciding what on earth it is that they actually want to study? I know this is a huge question for an 18-year-old. Full disclosure, I wanted to be a Nazi hunter when I was 18. I saw some sort of documentary on Simon Wiesenthal Center, and I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. Well, that's not what I ended up doing, of course, obviously. But that was like the way out thinking I was doing at that time. But one of the most frustrating things for those of us that are helping you all is when you get all the way to your senior year in high school and you don't have a clue about what you're curious about. And what you're curious about does line up with how you show up in an application. It also helps you decide where you're going to go. And I'll just use an example. You cannot enroll in a school in Nebraska and decide in the middle of that you want to be a marine biologist. That is not going to go well for you. You are going to have to go somewhere else. If you want to go into, there are certain schools have certain specialties and certain things that are going to fit for you. And if you don't have a clue, that's a problem. I don't think you have to definitively know. We know that students change their mind all the time. They go different directions. They discover things at college that are really fascinating, and that they lock on that, and it's like a click. But I do think you have to demonstrate some, again, curiosity, some interest, a passion for something in that application process, because that, again, impacts how you show up. We talked earlier about integrating, kind of vertically integrating those experiences you have outside the classroom. We've talked about, a curriculum that really demonstrates that you're ready to go. If you have no idea, then you're just going to end up with kind of a mishmash of things that don't really speak to who you are and what your interests are. So, I guess, what advice do you have for students that might be sitting on this call as, say, a sophomore or a junior? And what are some things they can do to sort of clarify that piece, or handle that they still don't know and put in a cohesive application? David, you want to take the first whack at that?
I'm so glad you brought it up. This is exactly what our whole practice is about. Because at the end of the day, college isn't the destination, it's your life goal attainment. And that's really why. So we're really focused on helping people with life goal attainment, then getting into the college of their dreams and winning the most merit money along the way. So college is the vehicle. There's 6 types of college, 4-year colleges and universities, not even counting community colleges, which are amazing, as Julie was talking about, because they can sort of, the clock starts over and you can get a better GPA and transfer into the college of your dreams. So what we do is really start with the bigger picture. What is your life goal? And most adults, we don't necessarily know our life goal, but in doing this over 22 years, really, we've basically used 4 basic buckets, which one is helping others. The next one, and that's very selfless. You help others, you feel great. The next one is making an impact or change in the world. A little more ego involved in that, but that's how buildings get built. Cancer gets almost cured, right? Things like that happen. Then the third one is having security, stability, control, and income. Straightforward. I call that one being happy. But lastly, it's when you're not sure. And this is the harder one for students. We do work with probably 20% of the kids I work with are not sure. They want to find out who they are and where they're going. And so that's the toughest one, because they might just be trying things on kinesthetically to see what fits. And you could say to them, hey, do you want to be an astronaut? And they might say, I don't know, I'll try it. Do you want to be a race car driver? Maybe, so the problem with that is that last one, when you really don't know who you are and where you're going, you want to find that out. You basically have to have a technical skill to sell to the marketplace while you're very, wandering through life in a nice, circuitous, beautiful route. Fun, right? To find out who you are, trying things on and throwing, you want to be able to do spreadsheet analysis, or I don't know, I'm making this up, but figure out how to do, something like accounting, something that's very specific and technical, could be AI prompts, whatever, that people will pay you for, could be social media, whatever, something that's very specific. So that's the most important thing I can say. If you're not sure about who you are and where you want to go, make sure that you have a technical skill. That way you can cover your base of at least getting a job while you're figuring it out. The other thing is, if you're part of these any of those scenarios, and these are scenarios, nobody knows the future. What futurists say is just scenario planning works, right? Just so recognize the kind of, the markers in the road, and then you adjust your strategy based on tactics as well, based on that. So what we do is we say, okay, if say you want to help others, what are all the ways that you can imagine helping other people that and it's often, you should look at what your parents do. We apprentice with our parents. It makes no sense to reject what our parents do. It makes zero sense, because we're training with them each and every day. I know, because I rejected what my parents do. Again, they were in education and healthcare. And I said, no, I want to be in law. I don't want to do corporate stuff. And it was the opposite of that. So what I was doing is I was rebelling, and at the same time throwing away what was the cultural capital given to me, which was really dumb. So I didn't realize how dumb it was at the time, not dumb, but, not a judgment, but just kind of not efficient is really the way to put it. Instead, what I should have done is realize that if I had a coach to help me, which is why I do this kind of planning, right? So it's just, if you can figure out what your parents do and then ask yourself, well, would I do either of those things directly, or would I do some permutation thereof, combining them, or, something that's kind of a riff off of one of those things. And had I thought that way, I probably would have come up with the career path that I have now. For example, it might have been one of the scenarios. So think about scenarios that relate back to helping others, or making an impact, or having security, stability, control, and income, or finding out who you are and where you're going, and then attach education. So when I was doing it, I realized that I was probably going to go to graduate school, because in the US, to go to law school, which is what I wanted to do, you basically have to get a JD degree or graduate degree. So that I knew that I could study whatever I wanted as an undergraduate. And I knew there were feeder schools that law schools preferred, and they preferred liberal arts colleges, which is, like Wesleyan, Nebraska Wesleyan, and all the Wesleyans, right? All the Wheatons, the Wesleyans, all the Willamettes, all the W's colleges, they just all, doesn't matter which one you go to, they all prefer that. It's like, pick your favorite boarding or day school. It's the same thing. It's little Oxford, little Cambridge, little Ivy. They all want that: writing, critical thinking, public speaking, leadership development. It's what it is a constellation. It's not a hierarchy. Everyone has it the wrong way. And it's like they're making it into horse race when it doesn't need to be that way, or sporting event. It's not. It's like, anyway, there's a constellation of colleges, and you just have to figure out the right type for your journey. So if I want to go to graduate school, liberal arts is the best, because it has the best feeder rate. If I want a job, though, it's the worst. I like to tell people that there are zero, it's not true, but negative numbers of employers coming to places like Occidental, where I went, to hire people. Right? Because where do they attach? There's no business major, no real computer science major. It's more like math, and there's really no engineering. You can do stuff with other colleges, right? Like a 3-2 program is what these schools typically do, but not many people want to do that. So what ends up happening is they all have to go to graduate school, or they all work at their parents' companies, or they intern. So if you knew that ahead of time, if I knew that, then I would just do internships and have a technical skill to sell the marketplace and get out and get a job. But more pressure would be on me if I went to a liberal arts college, right? Then there's hybrids, which are kind of in between the research university and the liberal arts college, and they have some pre-professional stuff. There's polytechnics that have a lot of pre-professional stuff. There's research universities that have a lot of pre-professional. So really, at the end of the day, most people want to go pre-professional. I'll just say that. The majority of people are looking to get a job, not go to graduate school, just statistically speaking. So on this call, I'd be interested to know how many people are really, really going to go to graduate school. Know for sure they're going to go like 75% or better, right? We ask our students that question, because mostly people are 50-50, I think, out there. And so partly it's a bunch of factors come into it, really. But if you know your career scenarios rely like doctor, lawyer, professor, you have to go get a graduate degree, then you probably want to rethink the undergraduate feeders, right? What are the best ones for that? So anyway, that's kind of how we do it. We don't lock anybody into a certain path, life goal wise, but they kind of say, hey, this is what I want to do, and these are the career scenarios. This career scenario is more likely, like it's more likely I'll be a lawyer than I will be an engineer. That's helpful. Now, that's a really interesting trade-off, because if you go to engineering school, maybe it's okay to go to law school after. In fact, it is, but you have to prove to the law schools that you're a good writer, critical thinker, public speaker, the same kind of stuff. So you might want a hybrid version of that, where you get a little bit more liberal arts, rather than a big research university if you're going to go engineering, which possibly brings down your hireability with engineering firms, right? So anyway, there's everything's a trade-off. There's no right or wrong. Everything's a trade-off. And we just tell people, hey, let's focus on your life goal and work backward from there.
I like that life goal focus, as opposed to, because we do tend to characterize this as, once you make that choice, lock into your school and your major, you're good. And that isn't true at all. I like that for sure. I think that's much healthier. So Kirsten, how do you look at wanderers when those applications come in, and what can students be doing to?
I love the idea that David had about kind of reverse engineering from the career back to the college path right at the very beginning. And you're right, there's lots of wanderers. I think we have about 60% of students who lock in a major at the start of their program and graduate with that same major, but there's still a really large chunk of students who do explore, who change majors throughout their program. My advice is to think about what you like to do in your free time. If you're someone who loves getting home from school and playing video games, maybe something in the computer programming realm is more in line with what you might want to pursue in the future for a career. If you really love reading, whether it be online stories or physical books, there's a career that might be in line with those skills. So I always encourage people to be introspective about what they want to spend their free time doing. Because one thing I never realized when I was finishing college is that your career is going to basically consume the amount of time that you used to spend in your public school or private school education as a high schooler. It's that 8-hour chunk of your day where you're going to be doing something, and you're going to be so much better off if you love doing that thing. So I always encourage people to really reflect on, what would I want to spend my time doing? And I always encourage students who maybe don't have any extracurricular activities or sports that they're doing to get a part-time job when they're in their junior or senior year of high school. Sometimes getting some of that experience in food service or retail can really help people learn customer service skills and help them realize, is working in this sector of the service industry something I want to do in the future, or do I want to go a specific route in college so that I won't be working in the food service sector in the future? So I think kind of exploring those passions of yours and maybe trying out things while you're young can help you to figure out what you'd want to do down the road. And there's time to change, but sometimes you just got to start going with one thing. Go with what your passion tells you is your highest excitement, and then you can always divert from there if you realize you want to add something else or do something different.
Okay, great advice, all. I have one final question, and then if you want to make some comments, and then we'll wrap up. But so SheHeroes is, our purpose on Earth is to illuminate pathways young women can follow and to find their place in the world. And perhaps someone is watching this presentation or will watch it when it kind of goes into reruns, I guess you could say, as this rebroadcast to, our constituency. Someone who watches this may be intrigued with the work that you two are doing. So how might a SheHero to be follow in your footsteps? How can they prepare? What can they be thinking about if they want to do your job? Kirsten, you're going to go first.
I would say to get some real world experience under your belt while you're in college. That was really helpful for me in my path. When I graduated, I knew that I wanted to work in higher education. As a senior, I even wrote like a 5-year plan saying that I wanted to be an academic advisor or admissions counselor. But when I graduated, COVID happened and I felt really lost. And I ended up working at Target for 2.5 years. But working at Target gave me a lot of customer service experience, and then a job opening at admissions became available to me. And I feel extremely lucky to be working in this field now because it was what I wanted to do. But in some ways, I lucked into that just by finding an opportunity after working for a period of time. If you can prepare better than how I prepared, you might not have to work in retail for the same amount of time that I did. It was awesome, though, to work at Target. And really, all those skills I learned working in customer service translate to what I do now. Being able to answer people's questions and guide them to faculty members who might be able to help them is a big part of my role now. So if you want to be an admissions counselor, definitely talk with your academic advisors and see what that career path looks like, and look around at jobs well before you graduate so that you can kind of see what requirements are needed for me to get into this role and how much experience might I need to have in certain things to be eligible to apply.
So plan.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Got it. All right. David, what if there's an independent college consultant out there to be? What should they do? They want to follow in your footsteps.
I would say to know the colleges. There's 6 types, on offer in our system, and just to know the differences between them. So actually attending different colleges is a good idea. The types, going to liberal arts, going to maybe a hybrid or research university or polytechnic, a specialty school, or teachers / comprehensive. Just knowing those differences, I think makes a big help, is very helpful. Then you can really see the difference between them and help people make choices. I think probably, having a consulting background is, at least that's what I have. And I, understanding basically how to read a situation, basically come in and analyze the current situation, look at all the stakeholders. The parents are key stakeholder. I don't see them as being different from the kids. So it's almost like a unit in a way. I know that sounds horrifying, but it's true. We're not as free as, or as independent as we think we are at that age. But it's being able to come in and do a situation analysis, option development, ranking options, selecting option, implementing it. Implementation's key. So and I have, it's a weird assortment of skills. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's people at different aspects of it that do a really good job. So knowing the colleges would be the thing. I think having a strategy or a law background or a business school background, understanding, how to do positioning and all that stuff is really helpful. Or a marketing background could be all right too. But I think knowing the colleges is the big thing for me.
Great advice. Okay, any last minute parting thoughts anybody has? And then I'll turn it back to Lori.
Well, I do have a question that popped up in our chat bar, which I think is really valid here. It says, how important are the essays in a college application? Aren't those an indicator of the student's ability to write? We were talking earlier about how, you needed to do all these different approaches. So what would be your take on that, David, for example?
Prior to ChatGPT or?
Yeah.
I'm joking. No, I think, yeah, absolutely. The thing about the main essay, though, is it does get workshopped by a lot of people typically, and everyone's okay with that. Colleges don't say, hey, don't let anyone see this essay, kid. So a lot, parents are involved, English teachers involved, perhaps, other people, even consultants, we're involved. We have writing strategists to help with that. So, I do think it's really important, but to me, it can't be ChatGPT. It has to be organic. It has to be, the voice has to be there. It has to be, I think, unique sounding, organic. And so I would agree. That's the main essay. And then supplementals are more kind of an ironclad argument for admission. And they have to be, I think, really strategic in the sense of almost like making a legal case for admission. Here's the value I bring. Here's the value I get. I can only get it from this school. And for those reasons, it's my top choice. And Maybe if selected, I will attend to kind of sweeten the, deal with the yield rate. But it's just, I think the essays, I believe, are super important. I don't think if you talk to, I don't know, but like, I think if you look at like the CACAC and the, how much essays are valued, I think sometimes they can be undervalued a little bit. It's weird though, because really good writers, I think it's one of these things that people won't say, but like, if there's just a really great series of essays and they know the kid wrote it and they could somehow tell it was authentic and it's moving, I think it makes a big difference. But will it overcome great, weaknesses like really low grades? I wouldn't say so. So yeah, they're important, super important when everything's equal kind of deal. That's what I would say.
And how about you, Kirsten?
Oh, I agree with everything David said. And if anything, it's just great practice to write a good essay and get a sense of your own voice, but definitely have everyone in your life who cares about you read over it. Like my mom always double checked any of my essays I was doing when I was in the beginning of my college process. So utilize those people around you. Talk to if you have a career counselor at your high school, have them look it over. The more people who can share that insight, I think the better.
Okay, well, thank you so much to our panelists and to you, Julie. This has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. And I wish so much you had all been around when I was applying for college. The whole thing would have been a completely different scenario. So, and what I especially loved is the advice about getting the other experience, because I have told people for decades that everything I needed to know in life, I learned waitressing to get through college. And it taught me all the ground rules of every other job I've ever had. So, I highly recommend that myself personally. So thank you everybody for coming. I'm going to turn things over to Sophia for a few final words.
I want to thank everybody for coming. And I know we all have a lot more questions in my mind. As soon as David mentioned yield, I was triggered. I don't know if you've all followed Stanley Tong. He is traumatizing the entire Bay Area with his case. But anyway, particularly for people applying this year. I want to say that, SheHeroes is here to help people, to provide inspiration, to educate, and we can only do this with your support. So please, if you can, consider making a donation. In Silicon Valley, we speak in terms of stock. Who doesn't have 10 shares of Apple stock that they could donate to such a wonderful organization? Or who doesn't have a couple shares of Google or a couple shares of Facebook or Microsoft or anything like that? I think this organization is providing such needed videos and inspiration that no one else is doing for this age range. And so please send a donation our way. If your organization does matching, please tell us. I know that we have some Googlers on here. And I also want to give a shout out to Nancy Blockman, who has always been a huge support to SheHeroes. Thank you, everyone that has donated and supported us. And if you can donate, funds, that is always appreciated. Donate time, or if people that want to join our board, we have a tight little board, and we'd be happy to bring on some people with connections with PTAs or national teachers organizations, etc. So please don't hesitate to donate and reach out.
Okay, well, thank you, Sophia. And thank you once again, Kirsten and David and Julie. This has been an absolutely fascinating panel, and we've got a lot of young people attending it today. So I hope everybody's really gotten some of their questions answered and is getting really excited about the next steps ahead for their futures in college. So thank you everyone for coming. That wraps up our program for today, and we will see you next time.